So how do you actually make the headlines? How do you make sure that your brand is newsworthy and worthy of getting some recognition? If you are new here, I am Bridget Aileen Cisco. I'm the co-founder of Visibility on Purpose. Here's the newest member of Visibility on Purpose, Mr. Aiden. He is here with us for today's episode. If you are new to the channel, we help small business owners, product companies, and personal brands get featured in the media without having a huge budget, without being a huge company yet. So here are those things that you need to know when you are thinking about starting to implement a PR strategy for your brand. Every brand thinks that they're newsworthy, but most aren't. We've been talking to a lot of journalists, writers, podcast hosts, TV producers, and they're telling us this all the time. And they're writing this in emails, so it's interesting if you're on any of their newsletters. So I have a couple things I want us to cover today, like what's the difference between being objectively newsworthy and just like thinking you're newsworthy. There is a difference here, and there's strategy involved. You might have, a marketing member of your team that will be helping you with this, but these are the things that we want you to be thinking about. We're also going to be talking about how big brands and small brands take different approaches, but how you can learn a lot from what the big companies are doing. Like it's not rocket science, but they're thinking deeper than just, okay, interview me, like I'm cool, I do this thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to talk about some companies that have actually nailed this and ones that have worked with us personally, ones that you know as well. So let's go into what makes a brand newsworthy. Now, for big brands, they usually get covered for a couple of reasons. Big brands, so think like Nike, Tesla, Apple, the brands that Patagonia. We love some good Patagonia. I actually just got him like the cutest jacket that is Patagonia. It's adorable. So those brands usually get covered because they have a new product. So if they say that you're Apple and like the new iPhone is coming out. Press wants to know about that. They want to disseminate that message to their audience and to the public. Or maybe like a major milestone in their business. Maybe they've reached a certain revenue number, a certain amount of like employees, or a certain amount of maybe they do like a give back campaign and they've helped X amount of people in X place, whatever it might be. Or even like a controversy. So say, Apple is they're breaking like child labor laws. I'm making this up. That's not actually true. I have no idea if that's a thing. But that kind of controversy is what they would want to cover in the media. So big brands, they're already known. So they have a little bit of easier time getting in the front door for press, media, any kind of feature, any kind of interview, because the name is already known. Now, you're likely listening to this and you're a small business owner. So you might have a personal brand, right? Where you kind of are the brand. You might offer a service. Say you're a psychotherapist or an interior designer or a real estate agent or a Reiki practitioner, whatever it might, chiropractor, whatever it might be. But you don't have that brand recognition just yet. Maybe you've like been on a couple of podcasts, which is fantastic, or maybe you have a new product. Maybe you have a CPG brand and you're trying to like get this out into the world. You'd love to be stocked at Whole Foods. Like that would be a dream. Whole Foods, Target, Walmart, all those places. So how do you do that? You really start by building momentum towards that which you desire, which for many of you, it is more customers, more recognition, more revenue, ability to grow a team, to scale the business, all of those things. Maybe you want to get like a huge warehouse if you're a product company, whatever it might be. So for big brands, they get covered because of those new product launches, those milestones that they're hitting, controversies. They're launching something usually. Maybe there's like a new launch, a new line that they have. Apple, again, a new iPhone is like releases, and that usually is in the news like pretty regularly. I think do they launch a new phone every year? I think that they do. A lot. Nike, for instance, they like do a lot of endorsements with athletes. So when they sign a new high profile athlete, it's usually a headline like Jason Kelsey. Is that someone's name? Jason Kelsey, signs with this brand, blah, 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 blah. That usually makes news. Those names are known already, and you're interested in that already. Tesla, okay, Elon Musk is going to tweet something, and that can make global news right away. Now, smaller brands like you, CPG brands, your personal brand, subject matter expert, no one really cares about your product launch yet. No one really cares about your service yet. And that's the thing, yet. Now, the reason that we're so passionate about this is because we do believe that like boutique, smaller brands should be able to get out there into the world, but usually you need to start somewhere. So where do we start? So we need to start with relatability. We need to start with subject matter expertise, and we need to start with our value and really adding to conversations that are already being had in the media. My business partner, Lydia, also has a PR agency. And I remember she was talking about a client she had a couple of years ago. And there was like this viral thing going on online called like lucky girl syndrome. And she said she pitched writers kind of leading with that lucky girl syndrome and saying like, "Hey, have you seen this thing on TikTok? Everyone's talking about it." And then introduce her client, right? This is where it comes down to relatability and finding, this is exactly what we teach in Pitch Party or DIY program, is what is that value intersection between what the media, what the public wants to hear about, what your audience wants to hear about, and where you can be a valuable voice in that conversation? Because there's always a crossover point. But what most small business owners get wrong is they just say, "Hey, like I have this new lipstick company," but they're no one yet. Why would they want to interview you? You have to come up with something that they care about. It's just like sales, but through a little bit of a different lens. So smaller brands, it's all about relatability. And this is one thing that, I was talking to Lydia earlier today. This is something that we've done really well with clients. They don't need to be, usually when companies come to us and go through our DIY PR program, they are small, they've started on social media. They are Ayurvedic practitioners or interior designers or CPG brands or, holistic practitioners or chiropractor. Like they're not well known yet. Maybe in their like local area, they're known a little bit, but they're not known yet. And what we really like to lead with is how you could introduce yourself in a relatable, interesting, intriguing, unique way that has that writer or that podcast host go, "Ooh, I'd love to open a conversation." And that's what a pitch is. We teach you how to pitch yourself and your brand and a big idea. And all a pitch is a simple introduction to an idea, a concept, your brand, but in a way that's interesting for others. So now I want to go into how smaller brands like yours can really be newsworthy. So the great place to start is potentially with a personal story or a little bit of a personal background that is interesting. Now, say you have a product company. Journalists, writers at top magazines, they're getting pitched hundreds of times a day. So how can we stand out? Well, usually it's through our uniqueness, right? So why are you doing what you're doing? I've talked about this book many, many times, but Simon Sinek, he has like five, TEDx talks, a number of different books. He talks about why you do what you do. And it's the why, not the how or the what, that really leaves the lasting impression on those in your community, your audience, potential customers, yada, yada. So journalists, writers, they like the more human stories, not just product specs. Like if you have this new lipstick company and you're like, "Yes, it's purple and it has a blue bottom," that's not interesting. But what if you're like, "We are donating 50% of, that's a lot. We're donating 10% of our proceeds to help X, Y, and Z." Or like maybe you work for a cause, or maybe this is like sustainable. Maybe this is created out of like beeswax and, you harvest your own beeswax in your backyard, or I'm stretching my story here, but you know what I mean. So we're leading with those things. And we shared this on last week's episode, liquid death. So I first heard of liquid death because my husband and I do these Spartan races. And usually after you're done with a race, they'll give you a banana, your medal, a fun snack, like a drink token. So everyone gets like a free beer, usually like an electrolyte drink. And one year they started giving away liquid death, and we were like, "What is this?" It was different from just the standard water bottle that we were used to getting. Now, liquid death is canned water. They're literally canning water, like not rocket science at all. Now, they weren't just newsworthy for launching the water in a can, but they had this message that people were interested in, right? Because of, we have plastic, we have sustainability problems, we have climate problems, yada, yada, yada. So they had this death to plastic message and very rebellious branding, right? Like liquid death, kind of intense, kind of like a death metal vibe. Maybe. And it made them unique. So, what I want you to take away from this is, what is your mission? What is the message behind why you do your work? One of our clients, and go check out her work, she's an interior decorator. Her name is Michelle, and she runs a company called Cultivate Your Space. And Cultivate Your Space is about how our physical spaces impact our mental health. And in a time where we are so connected to each other on the internet, but like so disconnected to ourselves and our emotions at the same time. She really has a great message to share because, yeah, she's another interior decorator, right? She can make your kitchen look amazing. And I think her work is just beautiful. So, Michelle, if you're listening, we love you and I really, really admire what you're doing. But she has this deeper message. So, how can we tie our brand into larger, more public issues? Like, what do people care about? And these things are always changing. That's why we say you want to be timely, relevant, and newsworthy. And how you introduce your brand, it's important. It's really, really important. Now, the next thing that you can be thinking about is, tapping into different conversations that are happening. So, news outlets, podcast hosts, depending on what they're talking about, TV is very, very timely. So, what's hot? What's a hot topic that people are talking about? Dove, we all know that company. They made a huge ripple in the marketplace when they really implemented that real beauty campaign. They tapped into like the body positivity, self-esteem, and just like helping women feel good in their body, where you don't need to be stick thin. I was watching, there's this really funny comedian named Mateo Lane, and mm, he was rewatching all those original like MTV shows, like Room Raiders and like just those weird shows that you probably watched as a kid. And he also was talking about Tyra Banks' Next Top Model. I used to love that show. If you look at those women, like that's what we saw was healthy at the time. I don't know when the show was originally filmed, but it's not a new show by any means. And the women were extremely, extremely thin. Now that was what was looked at as cool. So Dove comes onto the scene and that's not a new company either. But you're always able to reinvent yourself with these kind of messages. And they tap into this body positivity and like feeling good in your skin. And hey, it's okay if you have some cellulite and some rolls when you sit down. And actually, that's normal. That's what most people look like, right? So, how can you tap into these conversations that are going on in the world? Right? If you go onto Instagram, if you go onto TikTok, if you read the news, if you do that, if you go to some of your favorite podcasts, like they are having conversations and they're showing you exactly what they want to talk about. So again, not rocket science. You're just figuring out, again, I'm going to come back to this. How can you tie your brand into a larger topic, a larger conversation that's already being had? Like you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. And I was taking some notes before I came here today. It's kind of like you're piggybacking on trending topics and themes, but like not in a bad way. It's really a good thing. Now, next, you can be thinking about bold, just marketing in general. So, if you can't get press traditionally, which we believe all brands can, absolutely, and that's what we're here to do. But there's a company, Oatly, which I'm sure many of us know about, and I was doing some research before this, and they bought bizarre, self-aware billboards. And they wrote things like, it's like milk, but made for humans. So just like bold marketing moves. And again, this comes down to differentiation. Like, what are you doing different? There was always almond milk. Everyone knew almond milk. Everyone knew soy milk. No one really knew oat milk, right? I don't think before Oatly, there weren't like big new brands on the scene. Maybe the brands that were already making the soy milk, they had an oat option, but like it wasn't a thing. Now everyone has their latte with oat milk, right? So if you can also lean on like doing something really different, doing something really bold, doing something that isn't talked about all the time, you have a potential to get press for that too. Right? So can you do something fun, creative, rebellious that aligns with your brand, but it's going to kind of like pop when you reach out to someone? I think that's a great idea too. Now, last but not least, I want to go into the do's and don'ts of getting pressed. If you are new to our channel, like we have so much content here for you to listen to, binge. You can learn so much by just going through all of our videos. But I want to just go over some like really good basics here. So, a couple things that you should do. Tie your story into something bigger. Tie your story into something bigger. And here's an example of that. That's what we do. We say, we're here for the underdogs. We're here for the small brands, the startup companies that don't have a huge budget, right? Maybe you haven't gotten, funding or an angel investor, or you don't have a lot of like startup capital. You didn't come from something. And instead, you are just here starting from the ground up. And we're here to fill the gap for those business owners because we know that you're not ready to hire an agency yet. It's thousands per month and usually it's a retainer, and that's not the risk that you're willing to take. But what we're here to teach you is that you can do all these things on your own. And I've done it personally for myself. I've been featured in Entrepreneur, Delish, Yoga Journal. That was so cool. So, so cool. And interviewed on a number of different podcasts. And I don't have this huge, huge company. I'm a girl from New Jersey that has a lot of different passions. And I knew how to, again, be a valuable voice in the conversation that was already being had, already being had. Another do. Have a, unique, valuable angle that makes a journalist's job easy. And this goes for TV as well, right? So they are tasked with writing certain stories or putting together shows or segments or content. And if you can be a valuable voice, if you can have that angle that actually is going to support the writer, the journalist, the anchor, the podcast host job, it's going to be a no-brainer. It's going to be a win-win because you're actually helping them. That's so important. Now, third do. Position yourself as an expert instead of just promoting your brand. Now, we cannot say this enough. Subject matter experts, or you have a product. It's not just about promoting your brand. It's about showcasing your expertise. Here's what I can talk about. We have pitch examples and templates like in the program. So we're making this really simple for you anyway. But it's not just about interview me, interview me, interview me. And this is where Lydia really came up with this topic for today. She messaged me, was like, this is a good topic. Because she's seeing that writers are saying that people are just trying to say, like, interview me. And they're saying, no, that's not how this works. It's all about value. It's a value exchange. Here's some don'ts. Do not send generic press releases. Like, unless you're a huge company and you're already known and you have a product launch, like that makes sense. Lydia always used the example of you are a like Fender guitar company and there's a new product, a new guitar that you guys are selling. Company's already well known. Press release is actually helpful because they're just going to take that and they're going to, disseminate that story out. Don't think just being in business is newsworthy. That's true. Don't just think being in business is newsworthy. You have to have a little bit more there. It's not just about like, oh, I have a business, I'm cool, I make money. It's about the valuable conversation. So I keep coming back to this question, and I wrote this down. How can you tie your brand into a larger issue, a larger topic? Because that's really what's going to drive the show. That's what's going to drive the ship home. So being in business, that's not newsworthy. What is newsworthy is, being bold, leading with a personal story, tapping into conversations that are already being had. Little boy waking up a little bit. Um, and last but not least, don't really assume that that product launch that you have is enough to get media. There's lots of new products all the time. And I remember when I was running my publishing company, this was a conversation too. It's not enough to just have a new book that comes out. There are thousands, I don't even have the right number, but thousands of books that come out a day. So for you just to have a new book, that alone isn't worth it. Okay, do you have a book that talks about something that is trending, but you're doing it differently? What are your differentiators? And inside our DIY PR program, we have this one of my favorite modules. I think Lydia and I talked about it last week too, is the differentiation module. And what we do is we break down what companies are doing. And you likely don't think about this all the time, like Siete Foods or, Ilia Cosmetics. Is that what the brand is? Yeah. Ilia Cosmetics. We look at what they're doing and we give you those examples so you can start to say, yeah, what does my brand do that's really, really different? And then you can lean on those things when you send a pitch, when you talk, when you have your marketing content. Like it might be your background. You might be a surgeon turned, I don't know, like dog poop pickup company owner. I'm not really, that's a really bad example and a very weird example. But you can lean on these things that are your differentiators, and we break this down really, really easily for you. So again, if you have a product, we can't just assume that a launch is enough to get media attention. So to round this conversation out today, what's one way that you can reposition your brand to be more newsworthy? What are you currently doing and what could you lean on? Like what's going on in the world? What's interesting? What's trending? What's newsworthy? What could you talk about? And that's what you're going to bring to the media. That's how you become newsworthy. Maybe it's like statistics or numbers or something that you're doing that's just like absolutely fantastic. So think about your brand story. Here are the things I want you to do next. Think about your brand story. What makes it relatable? What makes it timely? What makes your brand story bold? What are you doing differently? What's going on in the world? How is your brand really relatable to what people are thinking and feeling? Remember that the buying emotions are pain and pleasure. How are you tapping into those things? Now you can experiment with like strong storytelling and just doing things differently. Maybe you try it out on social media and then you send out some pitches. We teach you how to do it. It's not that hard. And last but not least, like pitch smarter here. Make it easy for journalists. Make it really, really easy for podcast hosts. Give them the information that they already want, and your job is going to be way easier. Your ability to get, that email back, which is so coveted, just to get an email back. It's so important. It's going to make your job a lot easier. So if you are struggling to get press, chances are that you're leading with the wrong angle. That's just truth be told. So shift from thinking about what you want to share to what the public actually cares about. I'm gonna say that one more time. Shift from thinking about what you want to share to what the public actually cares about. Thank you so much for listening today. Thanks for being here. Again, I'm Bridget Aileen Cisco with Visibility on Purpose. This is Aiden. We are so grateful that you've been here with us, and we'll talk to you soon.